The receipt printer spat out a foot of blank paper, and then, in the stuttering dot matrix letters of a dying machine, printed, "Don't let him in." Chris bent under the counter and whacked the side of the register with the heel of his hand. The Z-Mart was empty. 2 a.m., empty, when the hum of the coolers sounds like a lullaby for machines, and the coffee tastes like regret. The wind pushed at the glass of the doors with both hands. The rain came sideways, making highways into lanes of chalky milk. Another slip slid out. Let him in. He stared at the twin slips as if they were a bar bet. "You can't both be right," he told the machine, because talking to objects was free and made you feel less alone. He tore the paper and stuffed it under the keyboard. His shift lead had a theory that ghosts were just electrical ripple. His therapist said grief finds whatever path is open. Both could be true. A pickup pulled under the fluorescents, tires hissing on wet asphalt. Headlights cut the aisle of laundry detergents into a procession of neon bottles with cheerful faces. The driver stayed behind the wheel. The passenger door didn't open. The wipers made that dying squeal like a mouse with opinions. "Don't do weird," Chris said to the store at large. He tucked his hair behind his ear and straightened the shelf of jerky like a man who will die for appearances. The bell over the door rang once. A kid in a soaked hoodie skidded inside, the way teenagers do when they want you to pretend you didn't see them glide the last inch. He was maybe 16, maybe younger, mouth a stubborn line, eyes old in the way kids' eyes get when the world comes in too fast. "Bathroom," the kid said, breath white smoke. He didn't wait for permission. He left wet footprints, narrow and parallel, like a smaller person had been walking just beside him. "Hey," Chris said, automatic, and then, softer, "It's in back." The kid disappeared down the chips aisle. The wind rattled the aluminum frame of the window and made the whole storefront vibrate like a tuning fork. The pickup idled. The driver's silhouette was a geometry lesson. A trapezoid for shoulders, a circle for a head. No movement. The receipt printer coughed again. "Get the flashlight." Chris chewed his lower lip until he tasted copper. He reached under the counter for the flashlight, a heavy metal thing that felt like it had survived better nights. The beam it threw was a pale column that made dust look like snow. He clicked it off. Night, after all, had its own rules. The bell dinged. The kid came back with his hood down and hair like a wet crow. He looked smaller somehow. He looked like a boy who had remembered he was one. "You okay?" Chris asked, because the little training card taped to the cabinet said to ask, because he wanted someone to ask him once and mean it. The kid's eyes flicked to the door, then to the corners of the store, as if the walls might listen. "My uncle," he said. "In the truck?" The kid nodded. One sharp movement. Rain tracked a clean path down his cheek that could have been something else. "He said I had to. I gotta get smokes," he said. But he had a pack already in his hoodie pocket, the shape giving him away. "Cool," Chris said, because a man alone with a boy at 2 a.m. is a tightrope. "You got ID?" The kid's mouth twisted. He shoved his hands into his pocket and pulled the pack out like an error message. He set it on the counter. Marlboros. The red looked too bright in the fluorescent light, lipstick on a corpse. "I thought maybe if I took too long." The kid shrugged, helpless. The shrug said at least it would be warm inside for a minute. It said my choices are 4 inches wide. "You want coffee?" Chris asked. The printer. "Don't let him in." The door rattled. The pickup's engine cut off. The sudden quiet pressed against the glass. "Yeah," the kid said, in a voice that wasn't sure he was allowed to want things. Chris poured a cup, sloshed more than he meant to, tore a handful of sugar packets and let them pile by the lid like a little white drift. The kid wrapped both hands around the cup and breathed steam. The bell rang. The man from the pickup filled the doorway like a billboard. He was tall in that unhelpful way, all leverage and shoulders. His jacket was Carhartt gone darker in the rain. His eyes were a flat gray you get in winter skies that don't mean you harm, but also don't care. "We good?" he asked, not looking at the kid, looking at Chris. "Bathroom," the kid said, holding up the coffee in proof of innocence he didn't owe. The man drummed 2 fingers on the counter, ink on the knuckles. His mouth smiled without checking with the rest of his face. "We got a long drive," he said to nobody. "The printer, let him in." "Store policy," Chris said, and the phrase felt like a small animal he'd been handed. "One customer in the bathroom at a time," he added, an absurdity that passed for courage. The man's smile went an inch south. "Cute." "Storm coming," Chris said, because weather is the last safe topic in America. "We came through it," the man said, and ran his tongue along his teeth like a cat tasting air. "You got that scratch off I like?" "I don't know what you like," Chris said, deadpan. His hands were steady. His heart was a basketball. He reached under the counter and pressed the silent alarm with the heel of his palm, the way you do when you're trying to wave at someone behind a curtain. The man leaned on the counter like a fisherman leaning into a story. The kid took a half step back, the cup coming up between his chest and the world. "We ain't doing this," the man said to the boy without turning his head. "Come on." The kid's jaw locked like a drawer that has swollen in humidity. "Mom said—" The man laughed. "Your mom says," he said, and the way he said it made the air cooler. The printer, flashlight. Chris picked it up and set it on the counter like a suggestion. He tried to catch the kid's eye. He tried to put "get behind the counter" into his face. The kid stared at the door, at the slice of night on the other side like a mouth that had remembered how to open. "Kid's got a hero," the man said, and tapped his knuckles twice, a little private code. "I'm flattered." The bell rang. Officer Ruiz stepped in on rain and lights, hat dark with water. She took in the scene the way people take in a math problem they've seen before. Her hand hovered near her belt. She nodded at Chris without moving her head. "Evening," she said. "Storm's moving north." "Storm's always moving," the man said. His smile went away like a curtain falls. "We good?" he said again to the boy, but this time it sounded like a threat. The printer clicked and whirred like it was making up its mind. It pushed out a single word, "now." Something banged in the back. A tall cardboard display for energy drinks wobbled and fell. The man flinched toward the noise. The kid moved the other way. He came around the end of the counter and stepped behind Chris without asking, the way a person steps behind a tree when lightning finds its voice. "Sir," Ruiz said, voice a flat plank. "Let's keep it easy." "What's easy?" the man said, but the bravado had a tear in it. He set both hands on the counter, palms down, like a man surrendering or getting ready to vault. The power hiccuped. All the lights blinked and came back stronger, buzzing like insects. The coolers sighed. The printer spat a foot of nonsense. In the stutter dark, Chris saw something he failed to understand later. A shape standing just inside the glass of the door, his own reflection, maybe, doubled and taller. An outline with a flashlight in its hand. The beam tilted and then stabbed down the aisle toward the back, toward the little hallway with the bathroom and the mop sink. The beam hit a framed "Safety First" poster. The glass flashed bright as a signal mirror. The man turned his head. "Now," Chris said, but the kid was already moving. He slipped behind the counter and through the little half gate that clicks if you don't raise it. He put the coffee on the floor so gently it didn't spill. He went into a crouch like a deer, and then into a run like a boy. Ruiz stepped into the man's space with professional indifference, and the man rocked back on his heels and Chris hit the door lock switch that no one ever uses, the kind with a little red lid like a nuclear launch. The doors thunked. The rain pressed its face against the glass and, finding it warmer inside, stayed to watch. "Cute," the man said again. And then, after a beat that changed him, "Okay." The printer. "Don't let him in." It took 20 minutes to unspool itself. Ruiz's partner arrived. Names came out. The man said the names like he was trying them on, seeing which fit the crime he meant to wear. The kid stood on the staff side of the counter and watched the place where ceiling met wall, his jaw working. A muscle memory of chewing off his own leash. He was shaking so hard the plastic stirrers on the coffee bar rattled in their acrylic corral. "Your mom know you're gone?" Ruiz asked. The kid nodded and then shook his head, and then put his hands in his sleeves. "You want me to call her?" Chris asked, realized he was already dialing. When the pickup finally left the lot with the squad car behind it and rain inside it, when the door's lock popped loud enough to make everyone jump, the kid still hadn't drunk the coffee. It had gone cold in the way hot coffee does, a separate flavor. "You okay?" Chris asked again. The kid nodded, a lie at last. "You had a flashlight," he said. "Yeah," Chris said, looking at the flashlight on the counter where he'd left it like a stage prop. "Yeah, I guess I did." The receipt printer had run out of paper. The last strip lay curled like a pale snake, the final line a dark bar where the ink had balked. Chris picked it up and turned it over in his hand. On the back, in his own handwriting, was a single word he didn't remember writing. Open. The storm straightened its shoulders and moved north. The coolers hummed like tired saints. The clock over the cigarettes clicked to 2:44. Chris unlocked the door again, and the bell rang like a small mercy. He poured 2 coffees and fixed one the way he imagined kids like it. He handed it to the boy. "You can stay until daylight," he said, as if daylight were a thing a man could guarantee. "We're open 24. The kid took the cup. His hand brushed Chris's, a brief static spark that felt like the metal taste of fear leaving the body by way of the skin. "Okay," he said, and looked at the door as if it might count them. Later, when the cameras were reviewed and the paperwork generated and the night shifted back onto its rails, Chris would scrub the counter with a rag that smelled like lemon in a way only factories can make happen. He would find, under the keyboard, the 2 slips he'd stuffed there at the start of everything, and discover there were 3. "Don't let him in, let him in," and in his own hand a third, "Let him out."